INEC have released the final list of candidates. Good morning and welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television International. It's the morning program and it's actually a Wed Wednesday here in Plateau State. Today is the 21st of September 2022. I'm Sarah Elisha Dashom and Rachel Tanze is here with me. Rachel, how are you doing?
I'm fine.
How is the weather?
Fine.
Okay, let's quickly rush through the papers, and remember we're live on Facebook and also on YouTube. Do well to drop your contributions on We'll Do Justice by reading it live on the show, and at 9:30 we shall open the phone line where you can actually be part of the conversation going on here in the studio. And the first paper I'll be taking is the Daily Times newspaper. We're starting with the audit report. Reps Committee have summoned the acting Accountant General of the Federation over the MDA's financial accounts. The House of Representatives Committee of the Public Account on Tuesday summoned the acting Accountant General of the Federation, Silva, over the failure of his office to lay the 2020 audit report of ministries, department and agency of the federal government before the National Assembly, in line with the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Well, you can do well to get the Daily Times and read detail of the story, more about the audit report of all the management, department and also agencies of the Federation. The big story, which is on 2023, INEC releases final list of candidates. The writer following the story say Claes Tinubu, Atiku, Obi, Kwankwaso, and others for presidency. Okes Kochuku, despite suspension by the ADC. Apabio makes list of senatorial candidate and Lawance name missing. 4,223 candidates to vie for the 469 National Assembly seat. Now you know that 2023 is really a hot election. So we keep our fingers crossed concerning that stories, and I just hope that you've all gotten your PVC ready to go exercise your franchise on the day finally. Still on the Daily Times newspaper, federal government warns against alarming rate of child labor. This is really a sad story, and we'll discuss it while after when I'm done with this paper. That we have 3.4 trillion naira can only subsidize 66.7 million liters of the premium motor spirit. This is coming from the NNPCL bus. Senate decide Ariwola status as a substantive Chief Justice of Nigeria today. So you do well to follow this story closely to see if finally he will be given the seat as the Chief Justice. And more of that can be found on page 2. Buhari seeks Senate's approval for insurance of 402 billion naira promissory notes. And we have on the strike, we have the House of Representatives, ASU have agreed to meet Buhari and others, and I hope the meeting will bring out results, because looking at yesterday, we are aware that the Speaker of House of Representatives, Femi Bajabiamila, met with some ministers and also with ASU, and some other people were in attendance of that meeting, even though he really didn't disclose in detail what was discussed there, but he gave a hint, the fact that they are hoping to meet the president, and whatever the outcome of it, they are hoping that it's a lasting solution. I want to relate this story with the other which we read, federal government warning against the alarming rate of child labor. Of course, when we're having insecurity, especially the northern, northeast, northwest, where we know that insecurity has eaten deeply into those states, then definitely the kids are outside over there. Definitely they'll be involved in child labor. So we have all it takes, I believe, that we can curtail this child labor to the minimum as much as possible. We have kids that sleep on the street. We have children on the street. That means there are those that sleep there and still hug there. And now that I see them going up and down begging, and you begin to wonder, a child of about 6, 7, 10, what is he or she doing on the street by this time? Or, hawking when they're supposed to be in classroom. Now you see where education also, we've actually lost our priority when it comes to education. So I hope that we'll look into that, because so much needs to change when it comes to 2023. Even though I know we can actually actualize that this year, but there's little or nothing that can be achieved, because if you look at the number of out-of-school children, we have quite a number of states, Kano, Katsina, Akwa Ibom, and many other states are leading. And you begin to wonder, if you check most of the states that are leading in this out of school training down, mostly the northern states, where insecurity is really doing a lot of danger over there, a lot of havoc over there. So I hope that we'll put our hand, not just leaving this to the federal government, but from the federal level down to the local level, and even to private individuals, we'll put our hands together and see what can we do to, leave these kids out of the street, make them to be useful to the society, because at the end of the day, they can be trained as talks. Election is by the corner.
True.
Definitely, you begin to hear one or two things happening. We're having issues of Yahoo plots and all that. All this is a result of the child labor, because people just want to make ends meet at the end of the day, regardless of what it is. So I hope that we'll look into this as time goes on.
And another scary part about this child labor for me is the children that get adopted into like foster homes. Just as you said, a lot of them can't go to school because of insecurity, and often at times they are being taken to other states because where they are is not safe. Now, a lot of these children go through abuse. I won't say it's better those who are on the street sleeping, but at least let's say you can see that these ones are hawking, for example. But what about those that find themselves in abusive home? You don't know the amount of things, only for the few stories that probably Newsline or other networks get to put on TV concerning child molestation, abuse, and all of that. These children are a victim of a lot of these things, but because it's like some are orphaned, some their family are far away, it's like no, they don't even have a voice. So sometimes when I think about this child labor, it goes beyond those hawking on the street. For me, it's all about those that are in foster homes, that are going through abuse, that are being maltreated, that are treated like animals. You can imagine how they go through all of that. So this is very scary, and it's something that the government needs to look into, is you making sure that when these children are taken by someone who vouched to take care of them, because wherever they are coming from, they can be taken care of, that it should be looked into, that these children are not being abused, because I know a lot are going through this. Labor is on different level. Some will go through hardship even worse than those hawking on the street, all because they don't have where to go to, they don't have a voice. It's almost like they don't exist. So this is something that non-governmental organizations need to look into, and even the government.
The problem is mostly it's non-governmental organizations that they are being left with all the saddled with the responsibilities of all the. But just like you said, it's everybody's responsibility. It's your responsibility. It's also my responsibility to look out for all these kids around. And the last story I'll be taking here said Nigeria's economy threatened by oil theft. This is coming from the Senate President. We have a picture story here where we can see the Senate President with the senators during the National Assembly meeting on Tuesday. And that's all on the Daily Times newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, Third Republic was designed to fail, says Tinubu. Kalu, what Igbos stand to gain in APC presidency. Ilorin indigents kick against Uni-Ilorin VC's appointment. Sanwo-Olu to U.S. investors. Lagos is ready for you. You can see that story on page 5. The scholarship for 556 LASU students. Southwest APC bars Akeredolu. You can read more of that story on page 5. And then the big story on the Nation newspaper. INEC clears Tinubu, Atiku, Obi, and 15 others for 2023 poll. And the writer for that story, Lawan's name missing on list. Commission clears Adiola, Adebule, Abiru, Bamidele, Olujimi, and others for Senate. And still on the Nation news, you can see a full list of the presidential candidates. Still on the Nation news, on the right side of the page, you still on the PDP crisis. Wike allies meet to decide next step. And then Bajabiamila raises hope on end to federal government on ASU face off. And there's a picture story where we can see our president and the rest with him at the 77th UN General Council meeting in New York. And on the downside of the paper, Senate to screen acting CGN Ariola tomorrow. Oyo award 36-kilometer Ibadan road. You can read all of that story on page 6. And that's all the news on The Nation.
All right, on the Guardian newspaper, we have ASU rules out returning to classes through court order. With that on page 3, environmentalists alert on gas leakage in Bayelsa community. Nigerians may shock political class parties in 2023, Obaseki warns. And we have Khan deploys abduction of the 43 Kaduna Christian worshippers, faults the government handling of insecurity. We are all holding the government accountable to do more about that. Federal government to leave behind 60.9 trillion naira debt over liabilities in 2023. The writer following the story says Buhari seeks Senate approval for 402 billion naira promissory notes. Federal government and states more aggressive in local debt mobilization. State external debt exposure falls by 73.3 billion in 6 months. Local debt rises by over 18% in same period, and then government silent on the CBN overdraft undocumented subnational debts. Now the question next I would like to ask Richard is who is going to clear these debts? Because definitely the present administration is going to leave it to the next, whoever is going to take over come 2023. What have we done to make sure that we have a way of actually paying back our debts? Because it's one thing for you to borrow money, but do you have a means of paying that money back? And definitely for every money you borrow, you definitely pay with an interest on it. So you begin to look at the accumulation. If we're having over 16.9 trillion naira debt, with other liabilities that are actually left for 2023, then we really need to sit down. You know, I keep saying this, if people are already of the opinion that for us to get back to the way we were before, it would take about 17 years. That means you actually finish a whole 4 tenure. Still, we are yet to get back to our footing. So I just hope that we'll really look into this. We talked about lots of our talking about the Ajaokuta steel mining that is lying there. We have that of just over here, the Roland Steels mining that is still there. We still have other, you know, you look at it, there are lots of industry that need to be revitalized, but they are just lying idle there. And we are not doing anything to look into what can we do to make sure that this thing start working so that we can have a means of paying. Rather, we decided to make a railway. What will that railway generate for us as a country? Is it not rather we go back to the seaport where we know that for every container you pick, you have to pay? That is a way of getting revenue, you know, into the country. But presently, we don't have, our revenue is really going down as the year goes. So you begin to look and you begin to wonder, what are we really doing as a nation? I'm happy that with maybe possibly after the 77 UN General Meeting, and also the business, whatever that Nigeria is hoping to, you know, to host there in New York, we'll be able to come out with something more tangible, something more visible that can actually work for us. And, you know, from the picture story here, I can even see the former central bank governor Sanusi over there. So I just hope that when you have better heads coming together, good heads, you know that something productive will come out at the end of the day. So I just hope that truly will move that way.
Who will pay? And if we are to analyze this thing very well, we don't know who will pay. Now, it's impossible for this current administration to pay it. Next year, they'll be out very soon. And then whoever is coming in, you wonder, what is he going to face? Is it possible for him with all the problems in Nigeria? Like, let's be realistic. There's insecurity. Now, oil theft is another problem. And all these debts, who is going to pay? I don't see the possibility of the next government paying this debt anytime soon. So it's either, the only thing that might be possible, this is my opinion, is probably not taking as many debt as this, or probably investing it the right way. But it doesn't change the fact that we already have debts that are piled up. Who is going to pay for it? So this is a serious question. Like, when are we going to start settling this debt? Like, the government needs to tell us how. What is the way? I keep saying it. We know the problem. Can we now know the solution? How do you plan on doing this? Because the problems are glaring. Who is going to pay this debt? I think this is a serious question.
I think, and this is a question that we need answers to. We're hoping that our viewers will actually call us later and see possibly we can actually give the government solutions, or possibly the way forward that we think can actually help with all this debt. Well, let's look at other stories still on the Guardian newspaper. Lawan lose out as Akpabio Umahi makes the INEC final list. And we are having a political page on page 24 that says, I didn't trade off my presidential ambition with Tinubu to save equity, says Fayemi. You can read that on the political page on page 24. And that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On the This Day newspaper, at UNGA, Sanwo-Olu woos foreign investors to Lagos, says state safest in Nigeria, declare budget doubles to about 1.7 trillion naira. Oil companies seek government's intervention in payment of $3 billion JV cash call arrears. More of that story on page 5. Lawan out, Akpabio Umahi in, as INEC releases final list for national election. More of that story on page 11. This is coming from Jonathan. My 2015 concession call collective decision to save Nigeria. And the story on the writer says there must first be country before ambition. Abdul Salami charges politicians to place country above aspiration. Mustafa says lack of ideological politics, major challenges for parties. Nigerians may shock political class in 2023, Obaseki warns. And the big story on this day, lawmakers lament as Nigeria's debt reaches an all-time high of 42.8 trillion naira. 36 states, FCT owe 5.28 trillion naira local debt. Lagos top leads with 797.3 billion naira. House decries crude oil theft, seeks solution. Menace driving economy into coma, Lawan cries out. Assumes INEC of National Assembly support to achieve transparent, credible polls next year. Buhari requests the National Assembly's approval of 402 billion naira to settle debt to exporters and states. Wants endorsement of promissory notes for Yobe, Kebbi, and Taraba roads. And there's a picture story where we can see that Buhari and Sanusi unite at the United Nations Council meeting. And that's all the news on this day.
All right, let's take a look at the midweek Ajezra newspaper. Court nullifies Taraba APC governorship primaries. Atiku, Obi, Tinubu, others make INEC presidential list. And we have Rec 200 Forex report. CBN says export remittance are improved significantly. And we're having the constitutional amendment on the way, Speaker reveals. And other stories here, we have the NESG marketers express fear as fuel subsidy gobs 2.04 trillion naira. And we have a report coming from Jonathan, and he said fake news, hate speech, biggest threat to Nigerians' democracy. And the big story on the daily revenue, Nigerians' debt profile hit 42.84 trillion naira, with the rider debt GDP ratio increased to 23.27%. Reps lament Nigerians' rising debt profile, and federal government launches national financing framework. Buhari to present the budget in October. That can be found on page 9. 70% of Nigerians don't trust police. Well, this is a report, and you can call us if you truly trust the police or not. And we have Zenith Bank customers groan over inability to conduct interbank transfer. That can also be found on page 23. We have two picture stories. You can do well to get a Jezran Midway newspaper and read any of the stories that is of interest to you.
And the Nigerian pilot. ASU strike continues as lecturers rep meeting deadlock. More of that story on page 9. Senate screens acting CGN Ariolo today for confirmation. More of that story on page 8. And the big story, I can take a bullet for Jonathan. Catholic Bishop of Sokoto, Kuka, says he can take a bullet for the former president, Goodluck Jonathan. Says that Jonathan is the face of democracy in Africa. Frowns at ethnic inequality in appointments in Buhari's administration as Jonathan raises alarm over fake news and propaganda. You can read more of that story on page 8, and there's a picture with the former president of Nigeria. Still on INEC, and 2023 election, INEC leaves 4,241 candidates for presidential election. You can read more of that story on page 5. Flood sacks 400 homes in Lantang North local government of Plateau State. You can see more of that story on page 7. Court sacks Taraba ABC gubernatorial candidate Emmanuel Bacha. More of that story on page 6. Buhari wants Senate to approve issuance of 402 billion naira promissory notes. More of that story on page 5. IPOP leader Nnamdi Kanu health deteriorates in detention. More of that story on page 8. Federal government rallies support to take 15 million children out of child labor. More of that story on page 8. And that is the good news, as we earlier talked about child labor. If the federal government have plans for that, let them start it immediately, because taking 15 million children out of this is not a small number. If they can meet this target, then we won't have to worry. On the downside of the paper, oil theft pushing governance. All news on Nigerian pilot.
On Dailies newspaper, Nnamdi Kanu must not die. Ohanize wants his health deteriorating. Family raises the alarm. And on insecurity, don't give terrorists mercy. Commander charges the troops. With that found on page 4. Big story which is on most of the papers on the presidential poll. INEC clears Atiku, Tinubu, Obi, and 15 others. Umahi, Apabio, Tambuwal makes the Senate list. Lawan Obaseki come lose out. Dogora restates opposition to APC Muslim ticket, says is anti-ethical to the nation building. And still Obaseki warned political class parties about imminent shocking election outcome. Buhari seeks fresh 402 billion naira loan via promissory notes. And we have oil theft pushing Nigeria's economy into coma, cautions Lawan, that's the Senate president, giving a warning. And we have a strike still concerning that. The reps education minister moved to broker trust meet ASU. And PDP moves to sideline Governor Wike. The writer of that story says takes South zonal headquarters to Akwa Ibom instead of Rivers. You can read all of that PDP issue on page 6. Downside of the paper, we have Tinubu presidency benefits Southeast. This is coming from Kalu. You can read all of that story on page 28. That's all on the Daily Sun newspaper.
On the first news, 2023 presidency. Let's wait for another time. Oji Kalu tells Igbo, says Igbo will be greatest beneficiaries under Tinubu's president. This is an interesting take on this, and if you want to know more of that, you can just get the first news and hear what Oji Kalu has to say concerning this. And still on 2023 election, Wike allies meet to take final position on Atiku. Presidency requires physical, mental energy. This is coming from Peter Obi. Calls Tinubu respected elder brother. Oil tough crippling Nigerian economy, pushing it into coma. This is coming from Lawan. And the big news on the first news is the still on 2023 presidency. INEC rests Tinubu, Atiku, Obi, and 15 others. States candidate educational qualification. Tinubu has BSc, Atiku has a master, OB, GCE, Concoso, Primary 6 certificate. And still on ASU strike, lecturers reach agreement with reps, awaits Buhari's approval. Finally, Lawan loses out as Akpabio makes INEC senatorial list. NatForce obeys federal government ban order and disbands. And Khan condemns kidnapping of 43 Christians from Kaduna Church. How I raped, killed teenager inside church. This is coming from a 20-year-old suspect. Flood continues to ravage Jigawa, 98 dead. And on the downside of the paper, Nigerians angry will shock many parties in 2023. This is coming from Obaseki. Now rolls out protest timetable, plans to cripple Abuja. This is interesting that they are continuing with their plan, that they even have a timetable, meaning when they are done with here, they are moving to the next place. We will see how this rolls out for them. Nigeria's biggest trouble is national unity, says Osibajo. And that's all the news on First News.
You know, the issue of flood is really taking my mind, Rachel, because it was on the other paper we read, which was a Nigerian pilot, where we saw that flood have actually in the Lantan local government here in Plateau State. Yesterday, we saw where some states were meant to vacate some communities, the likes of Shiruru in Niger State and other communities were being mentioned as a result of the flood because it have taken lives and destroyed properties. And warning has been coming ahead of time. NEMA kept warning people about this flood. And we can see it's not just in Nigeria, it is a national problem, an international problem for that matter. So I just hope that we'll take all the precautions that are needed, especially not building by the water side, you know, especially our drainages should be well unblocked so that you can actually have water passing properly. So we should stop, you know, throwing refuges anyhow to stop waterways from passing, because you know the way water is, the force is so great that if it doesn't get a place of passing, it breaks and causes lots of, you know, destruction. So I hope we'll take all this to heart, and then, because it really breaks my heart to see all the stories concerning flooding, where I hope we'll take all the precautions that is needed next time, because there's still going to be more rain in September than in August. You can imagine when we are hoping that the rains will be stopping, but it reverses the case right now. So we just have to prepare ourselves and do all that is needed. Well, I think right at this moment, we'll actually like to take a break where we can open the phone lines for our callers to be part of the conversation. Do not go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies on Echo Television International, where we look at various stories, and it's our news and current affair program. Our numbers are displayed on your screen, so do well to call us. What do you feel about the debt profile of Nigeria so far? We've hit about 42 point something trillion naira, and we still have other liabilities that are still on our head, and the issue of the meeting between the Speaker, House of Reps, and also ministers hoping to meet with us. So we really love you to call us and let us hear what your takes are concerning any of the story that is of interest to you. Let's move on now to the next paper, which is the Daily Independent newspaper. Nnamdi Kanu must not die in prison, or Haneze wants. You can read more of that inside the paper. Still on the strike, no fruitful intervention from National Assembly since 2021. This is coming from ASU. The big story, which is on most of our papers, INEC releases final list as Obi, Atiku, Tinubu draws the battle lines. The writer says Umahi Akpabio make the list as senatorial candidate, Lawan missing. Governor Obaseki loses as INEC recognized Oribia CAM candidates. We must eliminate deficiency in capital market, protect investors. This is coming from Reps, and we saw the governor of Lagos State. He's presently at the United Nations trying to say that Lagos is the safest place. But you know, if Lagos is safe and other nations are not safe, this will actually chase investors out of the shores of Nigeria. So I hope we'll look more into that it will not just be about Lagos, but we have Kano, we have Oyo, we have, in fact, there's no place in Nigeria that is cannot be safe or you cannot actually conduct any business. So I hope we'll also look in that direction too. Still on the Daily Independent, we have expect surprises from voters in 2023 general election. Still coming from Obaseki. And we have the 5G spectrum. NCC promises over 500 billion naira revenue in 2023. Journalists barred at the Senate resume plenary in the temporary chamber. Lawmakers vow to work with INEC for credible elections. Buhari asks Senate to okay the fresh 402 billion naira loan. Sanwo-Olu, okay, I read that story again. Sanwo-Olu will be investors. Lagos is ready for you. More of that can be found on page 7. And that's all on Daily Independent.
On Nigerian News Direct, NCC deploys 84 IT projects to support persons with disability. 74% citizens no longer feel safe living in Nigeria. This is coming from the NOI polls. Lagos ready for you, Sanwo-Olu to prospective investors. And the big story still on the 2023 election, Lawan missing from senatorial candidates as Tinubu, Atiku, Obi, and 15 others make INEC presidential list. You can read that story on page 22. Dissenting NGX shareholders fault results resolution at company's 61st AGM. Makinde approves reconstruction, dualization of 35.6 kilometer Iwo Road, Lalupon, Odo, Obo Road. And on the right side of the paper, top 50 brands. Dangote emerges most valuable for 5th consecutive year. Tony Elumelu Foundation, UNCDF signs African Youth Entrepreneurship Agreement. And there's a picture story where you can see where that signing is taking place. And that's all the news on News Direct.
All right, let's take a look at the Vanguard newspaper. We have a column here coming from Efe Babalola. He said, permit me to call on the National Assembly to see the problem of the police as the problems of all Nigerians. I think ever since that statement coming from the PRO saying that we Nigerians have no right to retaliate if a police slap him, there have been comments coming. In fact, the lawyer Falana spoke about it, and a lot of other people are actually talking about the issue of this police brutality, because if we do not want to have a repeat of the hashtag answer, then I think we really have to address that. And I believe that the PRO have to come out publicly and apologize and also address, this matter, because this can be misinterpreted in a different way, because he might actually meant something different and something different was said. So I hope that discussion around that will actually go on, and so that we can rectify that.
Exactly.
Still on the Vanguard newspaper, we have cholera outbreak kills scores in Yobe community. The weather is still cold, it's still raining, so definitely I hope more is being done, especially the primary health care, looking at the issue of the cholera outbreak, because it is really, really dangerous. I've been a victim of that, so I know what it feels like when you're actually under that. So I hope all will be done to make sure free health care has been provided, especially to people in community that cannot afford that. We're having Jonathan, the former president, said fake news, hate speech, big threats to Nigerians' democracy. We have oil theft pushing Nigerians' economy into coma. And this is coming from the Senate. Okay, hello, we have a caller, Daniel. Good morning. Okay, I think we lost that caller. We hope you call us again before the end of the show. Still on Vanguard newspaper, we have federal government debt servicing rises to 26% to 1.9 trillion naira in the first half of 2022. So this figure is as of June. So you begin to imagine by December what will be our debt profile. I hope we'll do something about that. And coming from the presidency, INEC clears Atiku, Tinubu, Obi, and 15 others. In other stories here, we have APC asks INEC to delete PDP governor candidate in Zamfara. You can read reason for that on page 13. And still from the issue of the ASU strike, reps leadership to meet Buhari after the UN trip. Why not will vote for Peter Obi? This is coming from Tanko. And we have the Kaduna kidnap. We're back to sad stories despite victory songs. This is coming from Khan. And downside of the paper, court nullifies APC governor primary in Taraba. Same fate ticket guarantee to end in spectacular failure. This is coming from Dogara. You can read more of that too on page 7. And that's all on the Vanguard newspaper.
On New Telegraph, federal government, Nigeria needs $20 billion investment to grow energy sector. And there's a report, Nigerian startup pays generate 373.5 billion naira. You can read more of that report on page 7. Why Buhari won't be impeached by Kalu. You can read that story on page 3. Are you, those calling for my resignation, not mindful of history?
Okay, sorry, we have to take that call. Hello, Daniel. Thank you for calling back. Daniel, if you can hear us, go on, please. Okay. Sorry about that, Daniel. We hope that the network will be favorable to you so you can call us back again. Please go on, Rachel.
All right, still on New Telegraph. Ohaneze debunks bribe for support allegation. You can read more of that story on page 5 and 3. If you want to know all he has to say, you can read that story on page 27. And the big story is still on the presidential election. INEC declares Tinubu, Atiku, Obi, and 15 others. You can read that story on page 4. And on the right side of the paper, Bajabiamila House leadership to meet Buhari over ASU strike. You can read that story on page 8. Reps begin probe of...
Okay, sorry. Hello, Zara. Good morning. Okay, please go on with your
Still
news.
on the New Telegraph, reps begin probe of 32-year-old NNPC joint venture contract. Asks AGF oil coils for documents. You can read that story on page 5. Senate screens Variola as CGN today. Directs police, DSS to probe Uber's convoy attack. You can read more of that story on page 3 and 27. Osibajo on the Lagos traffic law undergoing review for amendment by LSHA. You can read that story on page 8. On the downside of the paper, oil theft killing Nigeria's economy. This is coming from Lawan on the story on the rider. Oil thieves, terrorists deserve harsher penalty. The statement is coming from the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and you can read more of that story on page 3 and 27. And there's a study that says night owls at high risk of chronic diseases. You can read more of that story on page 8, and that's all the news on New Telegraph.
You know, the issue of oil theft tends to be on every paper we've read this morning.
Hello?
And okay, we have another caller. Hello, good morning.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear you? Please go on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go on.
I just want to ask in terms of next year election to know. I'm sure that you are hearing me.
We can. Please go on.
You.
So the issue is that I'm not sure whether the thing will work because based on the issue, Hello?
Go on,
We can
please. We can
hear
hear you. Don't
Hello, can you
worry
hear me?
about what you hear in your TV set. Just go on. We can
Hello?
hear you. Okay, I think I have to
They need
cut.
to release
Okay.
that man before the election because holding that man will cause a lot of violence in this country. So that's what I have to offer. That's what I have to advise you guys to. Tell the Mr. President to release that man before the election so that everything will be easy for us. But I've already get my own TVC to go and vote. You have to vote for Obi. He's the best president we have to vote for.
Thank you so much
Thank you
for
very
your
much.
contribution, and we are in no position to actually advise the government, but they know the right step. There are legal means to everything that is being done. So even though we had on the paper, especially where Ohanize are saying that Nan Kalu's health is deteriorating in detention, so we hope that the government will actually go check his health care, and then he will be attended to, and whatever the legal means that are needed will be will take on, because I don't believe we should take like say justice into our own hands, because we have the judiciary that have been saddled with that opportunity, with that responsibility of making sure that justice is being served. So I hope that all that will be followed. But I was looking at the oil tab, Rachel, before the call came in, where I said it seems to be on all our papers. But then my question right now is, for how long are we to still look at the oil? It's clear that we have to, justice have to be at the heart of this matter, because those that are behind it have to be brought to book, regardless of what position, what rank you are having. We're excited when we saw NDLE, they intercepted those people that were involved. And to shock you when you hear the ages of those involved in that, 50, 60, and you'll be shocked. These are fathers and grandfathers that are expected to set a good example, but they are not setting the example. So I hope that those that are behind this oil theft, something will be done about that, because we're really tired of it. But then apart from the oil, what else can we do to make sure things are in order? Hello, Daniel. Good morning.
Hello?
Daniel, we can hear you. Go on, please.
Uh,
Stop
Hello?
listening to your TV set, please.
no?
Please move away from your TV set, or I'll be tempted to end the call. Hello, Daniel. Can you hear me? Okay, please. I think your network is a bit bad, Daniel. So we really appreciate it if you can drop your comment on our Facebook page. You can still be part of the conversation if you can't get us through your mobile phone. So I just hope that more will be done concerning all this oil theft, because it's not just about having it on paper.
Exactly.
But we need to see those that are involved, and then that they are prosecuted at the end of the day.
And
Well,
just like the speaker said, you also mentioned it, the punishment. What are the penalties? You kept saying it needs to be.
okay,
Alright.
sorry, Rachel. Hello, Godwin. Good morning.
Hello? Please, my issue to offer to this man in Ghana. Are you hear what I'm saying?
We can hear you. Go on,
I can hear
please.
you.
Nigeria cannot be good in that man. Please, that man they cannot did not commit any offense. They cannot is fighting for his people. Please, let federal government release the man. Nigeria is violent today is because of ignorance. Look at them are here. We are having light 24 hours here in Ghana. But Nigeria is supplying light to other countries. Why Nigeria is lacking light?
Thank you so much, Godwin, for that contribution. Now, we still about the Nnamdi Kanu, and also looking at corruption, where we see we supply light to other nations, but then we are still having the power issue here, where we hope all that will be addressed before the end of this year. Well, I think let's move to the Punch newspaper. And we have manufacturers spend 639 billion naira on power, self-generating over 14,000 megawatts. You can read more on page 9. Buhari seeks Senate approval for the 402 billion naira promissory notes. Muslim ticket, APC risking losing poll, says Dogara. Reps probe NNPC 32-year joint venture 2023 election list. INEC clears Atiku Tinubu Obi 4,223 jostle for the National Assembly. Riders say Kwankwaso Sowore 32 other presidential VP candidates sail through. Lawan Machana Obaseki friction lose out. Apabio makes the list. Former President Jonathan Abdulsalami Kuka calls for peaceful polls. Picture story here we have Buhari addressing the United Nations General Assembly. Over 150 world leaders meet. Defense 712 million naira fraud allegation court tells Lamido. And we have Ondo buries 496 unclaimed corpses. Detail found on page 15. We have a call. Hello, good morning.
Are you hearing me?
We can hear you. Please go on.
Hello.
Good morning.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, please go on. Move away from your TV set.
I'm greeting you people there. Please. I want you people to send this message to Nigeria because Nnamdi Kanu does not do anything. See how they are torturing him. See how they are every blessed day. They are even go to court. And we say that I know that this court will not finish in this year. But the long they are if they know, let them really so that Nigeria will be. Because if you see how Nigeria is now, you know how Nigeria will be without this man. You people, you are journalists. You people will send messages to Nigerian people so that they will release man so that everything will be normal in Nigeria. Without doing so, I don't know whether even like God will help Nigeria. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. Still on the Punch newspaper, Ondo buries 496 unclaimed cups. Detail found on page 15. The last story, students to block Abuja Airport Kaduna Road today, with detail found on page 12. That's all on the Punch newspaper.
On the Daily Trust, Buhari seeks Senate approval for 403.1 billion naira for Kano Emirate as Ganduje doubles monthly allowances. And the big story on the primaries, despite generating billions, APC faces cash crunch. And the rider says party in debt and all staff. Committee members yet to be paid 3 months after. Fund being spent on running of party. This is coming from a spokesperson, and you can see that story on page 6. And there's a picture story still with the president at the UN meeting. And at the downside of the paper, still on 2023 election, Lawan's fade hangs. Apabio, Umahi, and others on INEC list. You can read that story on page 34. And still on ASU strike, reps urge federal government and ASU to shift ground. More of that story on page 4. Ondo holds mass burial for 497 unclaimed corpses. More of that story on page 22. World Athlete ratifies Nigeria's Toby Amosang's record. More of that story on page 31. And that's all the news on Daily Trust.
All right, let's round it up with the Business Day newspaper. We have the big story, Nigerian port. Okay, hello, Daniel. Good morning. Hello, Daniel, can you hear me? All right, let me round up the paper with the Business Day newspaper. Nigerian port risks congestion as 6,000 containers sit idle, with that found on page Naira.